So today I'm really pleased to have on the show an amazing guest. Gerald J. Leonard is an international keynote bassist and culture change expert. His program integrates music, productivity, workplace culture, and neuroscience. He is the author of Culture is the Bass, 7 Steps to Creating High Performing Teams, listed on Entrepreneur Magazine as one of the top 15 books on business culture that you need to read today, and the book Workplace Jazz. He is the CEO of Principles of Execution, a strategic project portfolio management and culture change consulting practice with over 20 years experience working with large federal and state governments and multinational corporations. Gerald provides an insightful and unique way of combining his experience and expertise as a professional bassist and a certified portfolio management professional consultant. So, Gerald, welcome to the show today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ken.
So I have some questions for you. I
Sure.
read your introduction and it raised some questions in my mind. So let me start with this one. What do you think has made you successful throughout your career integrating business and music?
Well, Ken, thanks for asking that question. For me, it's been my training as a musician. I started playing guitar early in my as a child, and I have a couple of stories in my book and on my TEDx that I talk about how I would sneak into my sister's room and grab her guitar because I was playing piano at the time as well. And I didn't like piano as much, but I really loved the guitar, but it was hers, it wasn't mine. And so after a while, she found me playing a guitar, and she realized she was never going to play it, so she let me have it, as sisters do more in more ways than one, right? But since that time, I really just fell in love with playing music. I joined a band with some friends, and one of them was an amazing guitar player. And I realized that I was never going to be as good as he was because this guy was playing like Jimi Hendrix at 14 years old. And here I am. I'm like, okay. So I started playing the bass. And from there, I just fell in love with the structure of the bass and how that works. And, I went on through school and did my bachelor's and master's in music. I even had a chance to study for a year with my professor's teacher up at Juilliard for a year. I was enrolled through the Manhattan School of Music, but I would go down to Juilliard and take lessons with David Walter. And the experience and the lessons I learned over the 7 years of studying in graduate school, undergraduate and graduate school, and studying music and performing as a professional, when I eventually switched careers and got into IT. And I got into IT at a time where if you could spell IT, you could get in, okay? And so what I realized was I didn't have to go back to school and get another master's degree. But if I practiced what I was working on and I went after certifications, I could grow just as fast. And by working in music and working at the same time in business, I started noticing the combination that great business teams have the same vibe and feel as working in a great jazz ensemble or a great band. And so that's where over time the combination came about.
Oh, that's a very interesting story. So tell me, what do you think is poorly understood about the new type of leadership needed? One that sees organizations as a symphony of gifted players and not a room full of worker bees.
Right. Well, with the pandemic and everything that's happened, it's forced a lot of things, right? It's forced companies where the old mentality was management by walking around, or even, just really, command and control. And when you have your workforce all of a sudden becomes a virtual team, becomes remote workers, you really you get a feel for where people are. And what people are realizing is that they can trust their employees because now their employees, they're working from home. Obviously, everybody's going through this challenge of dealing with the pandemic, but what they're finding is that because they don't have to commute, they're a lot more productive. And so the individual worker since the information age, has really become more like an artist. In other words, if you're a business analyst, or if you are a developer, or you write code, you are a writer, you realize that your skill set and your salary is based on your skills and your job, and your last performance as a worker. And so you strive to become the best, or better at what you do than before, where you're just trying to pick up a paycheck. Because companies are cutting back, they don't send people to training as much, so you have to do a lot of that stuff on your own. Well, if the workers are becoming more like artists, then the leadership needs to become more like a conductor of a major symphony. See, when a conductor comes in with a major symphony, he doesn't tell the cellist, the oboist, the trumpeter, or the drummer how to play their instrument or how to read their part. He simply gives them the big picture of what he's trying to create with the symphony, and he gets everybody to play together and to listen to each other. But he does that because he trusts that they're professional musicians, and he respects the fact that they spend a lot of time working on their craft. And so if leadership begins to trust and respect their employees and realize that they're bringing a lot to the table, and give them the ability to breathe and share their expertise, they're going to give much more to their company than just their 9 to 5 or whatever time they spend in their company. So that's why that change needs to happen.
Let me ask another question.
Okay.
How has music improvisation influenced your career as a thought leader, writer, and author?
Okay. Well, music improvisation it really starts with, one, learning your instrument really, really well. You also have to know the fundamentals of your instrument. And then playing jazz music is different than classical, where in classical, you simply learn how to read the notes, and you follow along on the dotted line, if you will. With jazz, you have the melody and you have a lot of chords. And then after you play the melody, then you're supposed to take those chords, and by learning your instrument, basically create your own melody or interpretation of the melody and kind of embellish. Well, that's like learning a new language. Well, what's the best way to learn a new language? Is to go to the country that for the language that you want to learn, and get immersed into the culture and really spend time with experts who know the language. So to learn jazz, you really have to listen a lot. You spend a lot of time imitating other jazz musicians, playing their style, or even playing exactly what they play, so you get the feel for how the notes work together. So in other words, you learn the language. So how that's helped me as a writer and as an author and as a consultant was, when I got started, I realized, I was much more, let's say, a musician and more attuned to math than literature and English. And so for me to become a better writer, I had to, study, but I also had to learn to imitate really good writers. So I did things like, reading a lot of books from writers that I wanted to imitate, but I also did something else called copy work. And copy work is things like Benjamin Franklin did this when he was learning to write. And what he would do is take an article from someone that he liked their style, and he would actually copy the article word for word. And then he would put it aside and then see if he could rewrite that article from memory. Over time, by doing that, he learned to get inside the head of really good writers, and he learned the language of writing. He learned the style, the rhythm, the flow by doing that. And so what I've done in my writing is I spend, at least 30 minutes before I start doing any serious writing. I'll spend 30 minutes doing copy work of someone's article or part of a book of an author that I really enjoy. And you can do that too to develop your skills. You can find someone in your craft that you really, really like, imitate what they're doing just to get the practice and get inside their head, and then go do it your way. And you'll notice that your writing, singing, craft, whatever you're trying to do will get better. And pretty soon you'll naturally adopt that style, or it'll develop into your own style. And so that's how music and improvisation has really taught me and helped me become a better author, a writer, consultant.
Oh, that's very interesting. So, how have you used coaching and mentors to grow as a musician and business professional who loves feedback?
Okay, so again, as a musician, right, when you start off playing music, and I mean, you think about it this way, again, learning music is like learning a new language. And as kids, when we were growing up, right, you had your parents, you had your siblings, you had your aunts and uncles, and you were trying to learn the language. Maybe your language was English like ours, or maybe it was French or German or some other language. And yet you spent time with your parents, your aunts and uncles, and your siblings, and you could barely, speak the language. But they were professionals, and they kept talking. And as you learn new words, they would help you. And then they would sometimes mimic you, but they would never make fun of you or put you down for not being able to speak well. They would encourage you and engage with you. Well, what I found is that, and even up as of today, the highest paid people in the world love feedback. Think about all of the top athletes. Even, I mean, we just had the Super Bowl yesterday, and Tom Brady, who's won 7 of them, guess what? He still has a coach. Here's someone who's been in 10 Super Bowls, 11 Super Bowls, won 7 of them, and he still has a coach. What does that mean? Well, it means that we need people to see things about us that we can't see ourselves. And we need great examples. Even if we're at the top of our game, we still need people to give us input. We still need people to bounce the ideas off of. And so I have coaches for my writing. I have coaches for my book authoring. I have coaches for my music. I've been doing some, released 3 singles in the last couple of years, or last year, and 1 this year. And I'm working with a Grammy nominated producer, and he's also my music coach. And so having coaches is critical to really accelerating your growth in anything that you decide you want to do.
I agree 100% with that. So many entrepreneurs and organizations have had a very rough year due to the pandemic, and many have closed their doors for good. What advice would you give to make it in times of crisis and even prepare for it?
That's a really good question. And, this has been a really difficult year. It's been a difficult year for a lot of people. And my heart goes out to anyone who's lost their job or has been put in that situation where you had everything set and had your plans made, and things kind of fell apart. When that happens, you feel like you got your back up against the wall, and you got to do whatever you got to do to try to make it and take care of your family and take care of yourself. What I would say, and what I've done in my own life at times like that, 2020 actually was, from a business standpoint, turned out to be an amazing year for me because of things that I do, and there were a lot of doors open. But one of the things that I was doing was I've always networked. So one of the things that you can do is to really spend time networking. Well, how do you do that when you're in a pandemic? Platforms like Facebook or LinkedIn, where you can then join groups, and then you invite people in the group to have a virtual coffee, almost kind of like what we're doing and recording this podcast, where we're seeing each other over Zoom. We could actually make this into a virtual coffee. Hey, I go get a cup of coffee, you go get a cup of coffee, and we sit and we look at each other and we have a conversation and we get to know each other. I've been doing that with my network. And, from that, there have been individuals who were out of jobs, found out that the person they were networking with is looking for someone of their skill set, and they find a job. So networking is one. 2, set goals. Set a goal for what you want, and then write your goal down as an affirmation. If you don't know what affirmations are, look up Jack Canfield and type in the word affirmations. He has tons of examples of how to write an affirmation. Come up with a few goals that you really want to go after, or what you want in your life, not, what you want your life to look like. And then every day, write that goal out by hand. And then spend 10 minutes closing your eyes and visualizing that goal. What you're doing when you do that is you are turning on your reticular activating system. This is the neuroscience, right? You're turning on the reticular activating system, and your brain starts filtering out everything except what you're focused on. So that dream, that goal, So if that goal is to get a better job or is to find this or find that, then your brain starts looking and thinking of ways to do that, even through the constraint of a pandemic. And guess what? You also start attracting those things into your life. Someone may reach out to you through your network and say, I was thinking about this. I'm looking for this kind of person. Do you know anybody like that? Wow, that's me. So those are two things I think people can do right away: network virtually, and write out their goals as affirmations, and then meditate on them, and then just continually stay positive as they go through this process, and they will see things happen.
It's interesting because I'm a firm believer in both the things you mentioned. I network a significant part of every day, and I have affirmations that I write out every day to just reinforce in my mind certain things that are important to me.
Right.
So you said that to be a great leader, you should leverage neuroscience. How does one transform themselves to start thinking better, leveraging neuroscience?
Now, to leverage neuroscience doesn't mean that you have to be a neuroscientist, right? Because being a neuroscientist, I'm not a neuroscientist, but I did, I've read a number of books about neuroscience, and I actually met up with and joined a group called Conversational Intelligence, and it's conversational intelligence coaching. And I went, after I read the book Conversational Intelligence, which is a great book by Judith Glaser. She unfortunately passed away in December a couple of years ago, and but I went through her certification program with her before she passed, and I got certified through her. She's like a scholar and writer and neuroscientist, and she worked with a lot of neuroscientists. Bottom line is this with neuroscience: when we understand how our brains work naturally and how they are operated to work, then we then can change our work habits and protocols to work according to how we're built to work. In other words, again, I go back to writing out your affirmations. If you understand that what you focus on is what you attract, for instance, I think it was Mario Andretti. Someone asked him, "Okay, in your racing career, what's the one thing that people should or should not do?" And he says, "If you're driving fast, don't look at the wall." He's like, "Don't look at the wall. Why?" Because wherever you focus is where you're going to go. And that's the same thing is true for going after your goals and for everything else. And that's all based on neuroscience. Our brains, wherever we put our focus, we attract. If we're focused on worrying and debt and not having a job in this pandemic, then guess what? We're going to experience all those things over and over again because that's where we're focused. But if we focus on what we want, even if we don't see it, then we're going to head towards that direction. There's so many different things about neuroscience. You understand things like amygdala hijack, when we get afraid and we lose control of ourselves because we are really scared about a situation. And then sometimes those are things that we just make up in our heads, like worrying. So when you understand the concepts of neuroscience, you're really able to understand how to manage people and how people react and how to phrase things so that you can help people create positive neurochemicals instead of the negative neurochemicals. And that creates better teams, high performing teams, and really helps you to build a great culture within your organization.
So what challenges have you helped customers overcome recently?
Well, a lot of them is dealing with some of the things I just talked about. One of my customers is a really large federal organization or state organization with over 1,000 project managers. And, I practice what I call just-in-time learning. And so we built a system out for them and has tons of data in it, and they needed some new reports. And so I created some reports in what they call Power BI. Well, when I first started the year last year, I didn't know Power BI. But I did some just-in-time learning, remembered that there were some tools that I didn't know that were very similar to that, leveraged that knowledge, and helped them to build some reports that allows them to drive into data to see exactly what projects they need to focus on out of the thousands of projects that they have going on. And in working with the team, I constantly use the concepts that I teach in my book, whether it's the neuroscience, whether it's the practicing concepts, whether it's being open to feedback, or whether it's learning to surrender to support, or in my first book, the seven principles for developing a culture that work, or 7 steps for developing high performing teams. I use those principles and processes and some exercises around neuroscience to help the team come together, and then to really help each member move forward in what they do. And it's really, it's really made a great relationship with my clients. And because I am still a recording basis, and putting out music on Spotify and iTunes. We talk about that, and we talk about my books, and they feel like they have someone who's a scholar at what they're doing, but also is kind of fun to hang out with. So we have a good time, and I feel like we're able to help them. I'm able to help them really make some changes to their bottom line as well.
Well, very nice. So going into 2021, what is one thing that you would recommend for anyone that's starting in their career now?
Well, I would say adopt the mentality of lifelong learner. Adopt a mentality of being a just-in-time learner. Things have changed so fast. Think about it from this angle. The technology changes that have happened in 2020 were scheduled to happen over the next 5 to 10 years, with automation, with remote work, and some of the software updates that have been made to things like Zoom and things like Microsoft Teams and other tools that enable workers to work virtually and so on. That is an amazing amount of change. Not in 1 year, but that 1 year's worth of change has been encapsulated, or 5 years worth of change has been encapsulated down into 1 year, and it's not going to stop. So growth and change and things are constantly happening, and we have to be agile in our thinking, and we have to be lifelong learners, and we have to be able to adapt to those new changes.
Okay. And so I did want to share with everybody your website. It's www.workplace-jazz.com. And Gerald, I will put your link in the show notes, and I will also put some links to some of the other ways that people can contact you. I really appreciate you being on the show with me today. It's been really nice, and hopefully everybody will enjoy the conversation.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Ken, for having me.